Hello everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. We're back with another Fact Friday. Marvelous to be back. As ever, please subscribe. You can go to Produce Like a Pro, sign up for the email list, get a whole bunch of free goodies. And as ever, we've got a lot of very wonderful, frequently asked questions. So let's get started. How do you go about mentally preparing yourself before starting a mix? Marvelous question. Hopefully the artist, producer, engineer, whoever supplied you with the multi-tracks will have also supplied you with a rough mix. If unfortunately they haven't supplied a rough mix, I'll just listen down to the track a bunch of times. Quite often if Eric is sitting there, I'll be sitting back, answering emails, answering your YouTube comments, for instance. And I'll say to Eric, can you just play the rough? And he'll play it. I'll say, hey, turn it up. He'll play it again. And I might listen to it 3 or 4 times before I even think about mixing. I want to know the song. I want to hear things that are things I could improve upon, things that I might want to take in different directions, make it more or less exciting, whatever it might be. The reality is like just getting into the song is how I prep for the song. And then of course, when I open up the multi-tracks, if there's something that I think is a big issue from listening into the rough, I'll go and identify it. Maybe it is just the mix itself, but other times it might be something in the recording that needs to have some additional work, something that needs to be fixed, some low-end issue, there's some build-up. But ultimately, just listening to a rough or the tracks in a rough format is enough to get me prepared for the song. I don't just open it up and start mixing. I have to spend a few minutes listening to it before I even do anything whatsoever to the song. Do you ever listen to the music that you mixed in a car or anywhere? Yes, sometimes music I've done in the past comes on the radio. Some of the stuff I've done recently comes on the radio. But ultimately, when I'm driving, I tend to listen to either Alt Nation to hear what's new and up and coming on Sirius, or I listen to a lot of talk radio. I spend my whole life listening to music, so I like listening to talk radio to find out what's going on in the world. However, if I've got a band on the radio and it's doing well, it's fun to tune to that station and see if it's coming in. And it is quite different how you hear things on the radio. The kind of compression that's applied on radio is very, very different to the way you're going to hear it through your own studio monitors. Even the way it's been mastered will feel completely different on the radio to the way it is when you listen to it in your own environment. Otherwise, and you're probably touching on this, of course, I do car tests. I highly believe in doing the car test. I know there's been quite a few people that say that it's irrelevant. I don't think it's irrelevant. I believe that cars are hyped to sound good when you're driving. So get in your car, turn on the engine, drive, listen to music. And if it works in that environment, it will work in many other environments. Low end is really good in a modern car stereo. Now, don't get me wrong. If you've got an old car from the 70s, 80s, or early 90s, or even mid to early 90s, you'll find that it's more mid-rangey. But most, not all, but most modern car stereos have a hyped low end. So you put your music on in there, and if it's blowing up and distorted on the kick drum or the bass guitar or the sub, the 808, the synth bass, whatever it is, if it's blowing up, then there's far too much. It's a great way for me to check out my low end. So I still do the car test. Other than that, earbuds, Apple earbuds, laptop speakers, anything, different things to hear it just to see how the balances are. Because a good, well-balanced mix will sound good pretty much everywhere, especially after it's been mastered. But even before that, a good, well-balanced mix should translate everywhere. What are your thoughts on overproducing a song beyond the artist's ability to perform it live? As a producer, do you limit yourself to within the artist or band's abilities to perform the song live? I think the short answer is I don't think about it in those terms. What I mean by that is I want the song to be phenomenal. So if it has to have an orchestra on it, it has to have an orchestra on it. Does it mean that the band I'm working with are going to have to go out and play it night after night without an orchestra on it? Yeah, that's just the way it's going to happen. I think one of the best delineations is good production to me, really good production, isn't necessarily about the quantity of instruments, but the quantity of parts. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean, if you listen to a Beatles song, they had an orchestra, but they still had a basic band in there. If you listen to any great production, even, go to a Muse album, for instance, a modern Muse record, or Radiohead, there are a lot of ear candy parts, but they all support each other in a way that could be reproduced live. When I think of overproduction, I think of like 8 conflicting guitar parts that are all playing different melodies, that are playing different things, that maybe come together to create this kind of cool cacophony. But that is something that I'd be very wary of. So that to me is overproduction. It's not band orchestra. For instance, 5 guitars aside of different frequency ranges. Dave Jordan, for instance, when he was doing Alice in Chains Facelift and Dirt, used like 5 different amps aside. He had small transistor amps, big transistor amps with the Vox Beetle amps. He had tube amps. He had all kinds of things to create this one guitar sound. Now, that isn't overproducing to me. That's creating a great guitar sound. Because if I go and see a heavy rock band live, they've got like Marshalls or Mesa Boogies or whatever it is, Bogners on stage, and they've got this huge wall of guitars. And you're watching them and you're interacting with them, and it's part of the live experience. The volume itself is a big part of the live experience. Now, when I'm in the studio, I might have to use various different amps or settings or combinations of sounds to get something that sounds as dramatic as being hit by over 100 decibels of live guitar amps. So that's a different thing. That's not overproducing to me. Using multiple sounds to create one huge sound is not overproducing. Overproducing in the way that you're mentioning it to me would be to have a lot of conflicting sounds, like different parts that are confusing me, that would be very difficult to pull off live. And a guitar player was like, well, which one of the 8 parts should he be playing live? If I have an EDM element, if I have like a loop and some synths and then guitars over it, even if that does mean it's playing from a laptop, playing some of those EDM elements, I don't really have a problem with that. I don't really have a problem with a DJ in a rock band triggering some of that stuff. To me, that's part of the production. Can also be incorporated into a live thing. I think overproduction for me is that massively conflicting. Sometimes it's ear candy, but when you think of like U2 and you look at the way Eno was working with them and doing a lot of like crazy ambience and stuff, it was just creating one energy of insane ambience. I don't see that as overproducing. I see that even though it may have come from 24 different sources, who knows, it was one texture. So I think textures and one sound aren't overproduction. Overproduction to me, to reiterate for the 15th time, is when it's conflicting multiple parts. And I'm not big on that, not because it can't be done live, but because it's not good production. If something is overly complex and doesn't grab me and it doesn't come into the point, that to me is overproduction. Otherwise, I think orchestra, band, EDM elements and band, that's all fine. And there may be times when the band can't reproduce it with the London Symphony Orchestra. Of course, that's not going to happen. So they're either going to have it on a 2-track, or more likely than not, they're just going to do the live band without the orchestra. And I think that's cool. I think that's cool to go to the Royal Albert Hall and see a band with an orchestra, and then go to a smaller club and see them without the orchestra and have a different live experience. That's what I love about live music, is the ability to have different kinds of experiences. Acoustic vocal version, piano vocal version, band vocal version, band with orchestra version, band with orchestra and EDM version. I mean, to me, it's all part of what we love about music. So that's not overproduction to me. To me, it's more about, once again, for the 16th time now, it's when there's parts that are very conflicting, and what do you choose for the guitar player to play live if there's all these different parts? That is how I would look at overproduction. So I think ultimately, if it's done really, really well, if the music is produced exceptionally well, then it supersedes all of these issues. You can have the complex stuff, and if it's done so unbelievably well, then the band will figure out their version of it live, whether it be blending stuff from the studio or doing an alternate version of it. And if they do an alternate version which is equally as amazing, then you've got 2 different experiences. And I like that idea of having 2 different experiences, the live and the studio. How can you come up with so many different guitar riffs that work with each other? I know a bit of theory, but even so, getting multiple guitarists to work together is quite difficult. Could you give us newbies some hints on the matter? thanks for asking this question. This is fantastic. And I've done a few of these, and we can link to other videos talking about electric guitar production. But I think about guitar production like this, like a piano or like an orchestra. I'm going to grab an acoustic guitar. I'm going to use this acoustic guitar to just illustrate some different guitar parts. But think about it in these terms. Think about it like an orchestra, or even easier, think about it like a piano. So you've got like a low C down here, and then 3 or 4 or 5 octaves later, you've got another C. So you've got, you know, I could bend it up there, another C. So you've got a range. Now, if it's, we'll do a really dumb chord progression. Let's do an F, C, A minor, G. So you've got this chord progression. So you've got an F, C, A minor, G. So you've got a 4, 1, 6, 5. For those of you who know what that is. It doesn't matter if you don't, but that's a simple chord progression. So what could we do? First of all, you could get the acoustic and just play the chords. Now, all the voicings are in this area here. You saw that all of the voicings are around there. Now, why don't I go and take that F and just play it in a different position? Why don't I come here? So a D shape, like a D, and then take it up to F. So you've got D, E flat, E, F. So now, I've got the F and I've got a C. So imagine you take the C major and you play a next inversion. So you've got a G, E, C. So now I've got an F shape here, a C shape there, an A minor could be here. The top part of this A minor. Hopefully that makes sense. I've got and then the G here, so the top part of that G major chord. I don't expect you to follow this entirely exactly, but you understand the voicings now. So we've got so I could just simply copy that. Or I could do, to change that G, because it's very similar voicings to this, I could do that G, like the D shape, and bring it higher. There, so we got. So, different voicings to the chords that are being played here. Now you're asking about riffs. Well, how about so I'm just breaking up an arpeggio. Or we could do the high line of just the 2 top highest notes. So immediately we're starting to get in some different riffs. How about, you know, putting in a little melody with that? So we've got the, how about, so we could play a bit more of an arpeggio on it. So we've got, a little bit of a melody there. So over that, so you got, sing melodies, try them out on guitar. The point is, it's for me, it's like I think about it on a piano or an orchestral idea, because what I'm trying to do is make sure there's not a lot of crossover. One of the difficulties is with writing guitar parts that work together is where everybody's playing the same voicing. So if I was playing a G major like this, very, very similar voicing. There's barely any difference. The only note that's different from that is a low B. There isn't a low B in this shape, but there is in this. However, every other voicing is covered in this chord. Well, for instance, let's just say we're playing this. We know that the B would work, a low one, so we could do over it. The point is you're looking to stack chords, stack riffs, stack ideas that layer nicely. So we got first one, second one. Now, why don't we go one higher on our first F? So we've got an F there, and then we can go to the C here, then an A minor here, to a G here. Next voicing up. So you can get all of these voices contained. So that voicing now is above this one. So we can have one doing and one doing. And they'll create a beautiful harmony to each other. It's really not as difficult as it sounds. And, you know, knowing basic melody, basic scales, because this is all completely in C major, for instance, means you could play melody ideas. One of the things I love to do is find open strings. Now, a G will work on every chord. It will be an F9 on this first chord, the 5 of the C, an A minor 7, and of course the root of the last chord. So why don't we try finding common tones with these chords? So here's an F. We could play the F with the G ringing. And then we go to the C, we could go. Then we go to the A. Back to the G. You know, we could maybe slide from the C to the F, C to the G, to the E, so it fits over the chords. It's like taking the notes of the chords, finding common tones, pedals, all this kind of stuff. There's loads more to it. Then, of course, you could take these chords and make them all 9s. You know. Creates a whole different melody, creates a whole different mood. There's so much that you can do that's we're only sort of touching on. That's where I like to get bass guitars and then start playing in the mid-range of the bass guitar. It's a lot of fun. Layering guitars is not as complicated as it sounds if you just apply logic, meaning not always doubling up the same voicing. So not playing a G here, a G here, you know, and expecting it to have a different result. If a G's going to be here or here, then the next one should be here, here, you know, all the way up to here possibly, or here. These are all different voicings. So learn your chords, get to know your fretboard so you know where a C is, 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 a C is. So you know where to find these notes. Anyway, marvelous question. Just scraping the surface. I think we should do a whole video on guitar production. Love doing this stuff, so thank you for the marvelous question. Why do bands record in standard tuning but then play half step down live? I realize it's for the vocalist, but why not just record it down a half step? That's a marvelous question, he says, picking up his guitar. There is a sense of urgency in a guy or girl's voice when they're singing right on the edge. There's a company I met with a couple of years ago that had this software where they loaded in every major hit over the last, I think it was 20, 30 years, going back through the 80s, 90s, maybe some of the 70s as well, and even some of the 60s. They took all the major hits and then they figured out what was common. Now, obviously, there's loads of exceptions. So they were just trying to find some things that were common to all of them. They could pinpoint that we're going to increase it. People are always looking for, you know, competitive edges. And one of their things was to figure out what is consistent in hit songs. And even though it's not in every song, nothing is an absolute. One of the things they found was when singers were singing right at the edge of their range. So for me, I don't know where my voice is at the moment, but I can't hear that D at the moment. It's the C's probably. So, you know, like a oh well. Yeah, can't even get to it at the moment. My point is that's my high note. Sorry to put you all through a lot of pain there. So if I had a chorus that was like that's gonna give me some sort of like angst. It's right on the edge, and that's exciting. However, let's be honest, Reproducing that every single night might happen every other night is difficult for a singer. If a singer is on tour and singing consistently and it's right on the edge, they can't guarantee they're going to hit it every night. So if they do have to drop the song down from C, for instance, and do it in B, it makes sense to be able to perform it live. There's nothing worse than going and seeing your favorite singer, who might be an incredible singer, just be right on the edge of their range and not quite hit it. The point is, if you go down a semitone to B major, for instance, and not try and hit that C, but hit a B, that might be on the edge of their range consistently outside of the studio when you're touring. So lots of very good reasons. And then the second reason, of many, but a second really big reason, is a lot of people have recorded these songs when they were much younger. I'm a huge Bowie fan, and I know that when he was doing Life on Mars, it's a god-awful small affair with a girl with a mouse. I remember watching him doing it. I can't remember if it was live at the BBC or something, and he did it, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, internet, but I believe he did it one tone lower. Sitting on the dance floor, oh yeah, look at those cavemen go, it's a glorious show. It's a you know that one? I don't know if it was an A or maybe even higher. The point was that high note was probably something, not definitely, the guy was a legend, but probably or possibly he brought it down because he wasn't quite hitting that high note anymore, because at that point he was in his 60s and not in his 20s. That is biology. And so you go and see some of your favorite bands that may have been screaming and right up there, maybe even as much as 10 years ago, but now they haven't quite got that. Now, it's also, once again, coming back to the first point, it's probably more about consistently performing. And artists, and this isn't a big one, I think this is the third and most important point, artists have a duty to go out there and give you your money's worth. A good artist has to go out there and deliver night after night. It means if they have to sing the song a semitone or a tone lower, half step or a full step lower, to be able to do it consistently every night, then that's what they should do. Lots of people are spending their hard-earned cash to come and see their favorite artist perform live. And if that's the way it's going to get through the song and make it great, then let's do it. Most of the time, it's only us that notices. It's just a fact. You know, if you went to go and see your favorite band and normally their song is... but they're doing it... You get my point. To the audience out there, they're seeing their favorite musicians on stage performing that song. And that is a big, big deal. So anyway, have a marvelous time recording and mixing. Thank you for the amazing questions. This is so much fun. And you gave me an excuse to pick up a guitar again. Please hit us with more questions. I really appreciate it. This has been a wonderful Fact Friday, and we'll see you all again very, very soon. Have a marvelous time.